It's the great emergency versus constitution debate in Parliament. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo story. Narendra Modi invoked the anniversary of Indira Gandhi's emergency in a long series of tweets today, quite consciously trying to puncture the symbolism that the opposition has created by carrying copies of the constitution to the Lok Sabha. In fact, Rahul Gandhi waived the constitution even while the Prime Minister was taking oath. And today, when it was his turn to take oath, he held up a copy of the constitution. The great democracy debate has returned in the form of the old emergency versus what the opposition is calling an undeclared emergency. Meanwhile, both sides have gone to battle over who will be the Lok Sabha speaker. There is going to be a rare election after attempts at creating a consensus failed. Rahul Gandhi attacked the Prime Minister for saying one thing and doing another. Meanwhile, the Delhi High Court has decided that Arvind Kejriwal is to stay in jail and that the trial court that said that he should get bail had not applied his mind. As Rahul Gandhi and Prime Minister Modi go to war over the Lok Sabha speaker, the emergency of the 1970s, and what the opposition calls the undeclared emergency today, with their counterfoil being the copies of the constitution, let's introduce our panel today on the great democracy debate and also on the great battle for the Lok Sabha speaker. Tavleen Singh, veteran columnist and journalist, is with us. Welcome as always. Percival Bilemoria, senior advocate and analyst, is with us. Welcome to the program, Percy. Sabha Naqvi, author and journalist, is with us. Welcome. Rajat Sethi, political analyst, is with us. And also joining us is Dr. Manisha Priyam, well-known political analyst. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. The first thing, of course, that has happened is the constitution, in a sense, becoming a protagonist in this parliamentary battle. And before we come to the nitty-gritty of the fight over the Lok Sabha speaker, I just want quick comments on that. Tavleen, what do you make of the fact that Narendra Modi is leading the charge on reminding or trying to remind people that the Congress that talks about democracy today was once responsible for the emergency? The Congress is countering it with the very potent symbolism of the Constitution. Rahul Gandhi, and we can play those pictures, held that up today while he took his own oath. What do you make of this emergency versus undeclared emergency debate? Tavleen Singh.
Look, I'm probably the only one on the panel who actually lived through the emergency. I just begun my career in the Statesman newspaper when it was declared. And nobody who lived through that time would compare it to anything that Narendra Modi has done. He's been autocratic. He's been very allergic to dissent and dissidents, etc. But when Rahul Gandhi talks about an undeclared emergency, he would have been in jail if there was an undeclared emergency. Every opposition leader was in jail. Every journalist. I mean, most journalists that I knew were either being threatened with jail, or we had to be very careful. The Statesman, I remember, tried to defy press censorship, and we came out on the 26th with blank pages or blank spaces where the arrest of the opposition leaders, where that story was. And after that, we had to do the pre-censorship. So we had to send the paper to the PIB every day, and it would be returned at 8 o'clock, which made the paper quite, useless. So there is no comparison, and it's wrong to make this comparison. If the Prime Minister is reminding us that this is the 50th anniversary of the emergency, we should remember. If you don't remember, things happen again.
But the opposition calls this an undeclared emergency, a kind of covert set of restrictions that they say impede democracy.
Well, there's some truth in that, in the sense that the dissidence has been, crushed. I mean, my son's been a victim of that. He wrote an article and, lost his right to come to India. So, I know that there's been autocracy, there's been there's been misuse of intelligence agencies, of enforcement directorate, of all that. But it doesn't compare with, the whole opposition being put in jail overnight. And we not be, and nobody was allowed to speak about it, or it was a terrible time. It doesn't compare with anything I've seen in the past 10 years.
Let me bring in Saba Naqvi at this point. Do you agree that when we use phrases like emergency and undeclared emergency, this is apples and oranges? You can't compare the two. What do you say, Saba?
I actually agree with Tavleen, and I think, and I see uh, that you can't compare an emergency with, we can call it creeping authoritarianism, we can say majoritarianism, which has just been challenged and pushed back a little bit in this mandate. But you cannot use a phrase like, because, and I see also, I see no, if the Prime Minister is talking about the emergency, good, he will never want to repeat that. And some of the, and yes, there are problems, of course. There are people who are behind bars under laws which should not apply to them. I'm one of those who firmly believes that. Anti-terror laws have been used randomly, and there are a few things that this government can do now. It's in coalition, instead of just giving us slogans like Modi 3.0 and nothing will change, and the kind of threats that come to someone like me on social media just randomly. They can just mellow back a little bit, push back, and I completely agree with Tavleen. Yes, and she has suffered with what her son has endured, who, with that not being allowed to come to his country where his mother lives, where he's from originally. It is a personal, you face a personal situation, and one knows many people who have suffered, but the emergency is the emergency. It is a suspension. It is the moment when India could have stopped being a democracy. It could have become an autocratic rule. Yes, Indira Gandhi did stop and she did have an election, whatever it is, but it was a terrible moment. That's not happened. All of us are still, we are very much in a democracy. There are many imperfections, and I love being one of the people who calls it out. I'm not one of those who thinks we must obey and never question the election commission. We must question it. I'm not one of those who says you must behave obediently like children in a classroom in Parliament. No, you must make a noise and stand up for things you believe in. But an emergency, I actually entirely agree with the way Tavleen has phrased it.
Okay, that's an interesting point of consensus. Use words majoritarianism, authoritarianism, call out the misuse of certain laws that are considered draconian, but don't. These are not interchangeable phases of Indian politics. Manisha Priyam, do you agree that when the Prime Minister invokes the emergency era, the opposition can't hit back and say, "But you're doing the same. You just haven't called it that."
So I'd like to differ from very eminent panelists here, and the emergency. Remember, I would like to once again say that I was born to emergency, and my own political consciousness was trained as emergency was coming up. Now the anecdotes are for another era, but for the moment, let's see how we analyze the emergency. The emergency was not just the proclamation of the emergency. The president became a rubber stamp in the proclamation of the emergency. Now, let's see whether that's happening or not. Before the emergency, there were a series of conflicts, and that put the entire machinery of separation of powers, because of which the Supreme Court had to come up with something called the basic structure doctrine. Do we think that Kesavanand Bharati type movements have arisen in the past or not? My answer would be yes. Institutions have had to come up. Remember, contingent circumstances cannot become all the same. Social sciences are not natural sciences that you can repeat the same experiment again. You definitely cannot have something like the emergency or Nazism ever again. I mean, they were bad moments. But look at the number of things that have happened. Look at the times when we've seen the Honorable Prime Minister make a proclamation on the television to the citizens. How many of us really believe that demonetization was an authorized act of the parliament, even if the Supreme Court said what they said, and should have been what is called a ukase, an edict to be ushered upon India's citizenry without notice at night? Do you know that the COVID educational emergencies, forget the other things, the lockdowns that we've had, there are global indices that tell us that our educational emergencies were among the strictest. So I think my question as an academic is, what's different between that moment of emergency? Look, emergency is not a widely used academic word, it's authoritarianism. How does that moment differ from this one? Or are these completely non-comparable? And you will find that the
The
answers
fact,
will lie on
the
a date
fact,
and a range.
can I? Can I try and attempt to answer that? The fact that we're having this debate with nobody stopping us is probably what distinguishes that moment from this one.
Well, I think not till today, but you see the parliament come back, and you will find till now the leaders were in the hurly burly of the political field. We are still waiting for those who come on YouTube and speak their mind. We will see that there may be different forms of sanctions and different forms of impunity. The devices have been very different, but these are different form of sanctions. During COVID, for example, the RWS were enough to tell us a lot of things that were curtailing citizens' rights. And how much time would it have taken to resurrect our rights? There were many things that were happening. This is not the time. But I will, for example, during the emergency, the important point is made by Sabha. How many anti-terror laws were there? One, Maintenance of Internal Security Act, and Laluji's eldest daughter, who's now an elected member of the Lok Sabha, was named after that. But look at the number of people who are under acts that we do not even understand. So if we are trying to say that sanctions do not exist for speaking out, I don't think that's correct. If we are trying to say that everybody in there on the UAPA is someone who should be there and they have really, put the Indian Republic under threat, I think there are differing opinions. And the fact is, there is a lot more scare amongst the citizenry. This moment would not have been possible, Barkha, if this election had not turned this way. It's not about how we are. This election has turned a particular way, and some amount of arguments are able to stand. That's what is different about this moment.
Okay. Let me bring in Rajat at this point, that it's the verdict that has opened up spaces that had almost entirely closed, is in a way the essence of Dr. Manisha Priyam's argument, and that you don't need a declaration. If there is enough fear, if there is enough weaponization of laws, of institutional agencies, that it may never be called an emergency again. But the essence, there are strains of it that are similar. You would say what?
Well, had there been any semblance of the instincts to clamp down on any voice which is not in sync with the government, then you would have seen, during the farmers' protest, you would have seen a very big clamp down on that protest. The sheer fact, and that time Modi wasn't at 240, he was at its strong chest thumping majority numbers then. And he allowed the protest to carry on through and through, and I think that is the proof in the pudding that way. And there have been series of protests, the way university protests have carried on, right from Rohit Vemula's protest. It turned out to be a completely different case altogether after the investigations were done, all the way up to what is happening in JNU. And we saw consistently that the young, the farmers, even labor unions protested when it came to labor codes being changed in certain states. So all in all, we are in that larger milieu where state governments and the central governments are largely intolerant. That's like a broad direction in which everybody is headed. Pick up state governments. I can tell you, in Andhra Pradesh, when Jagan was ruling, you could not post a social media post against that government. He had such strong CID people working against you that Chandrababu Naidu had to run the entire social media campaign out of Hyderabad. And that too, Jagan used to send his police officers to Hyderabad to actually go out and arrest and raid the offices. Look at what is happening in Karnataka right now. They are going after journalists here and there, trying to arrest them for any post that they do. So that instinct is there across the aisle. Today, Rahul Gandhi, when he flashes the book of the constitution, it just seems juvenile, because you are running certain state governments who are practicing basically the same set of authoritarian instincts that perhaps the BJP governments are. How are you different? My point is that till you do not internalize that there was something which was wrong that happened 25 years, 50 years back during the emergency days, he should first go and flash that book before the portrait of Indira Gandhi in the parliament, and then confidently say that was a mistake, that was the biggest assault on the constitution, and under my watch, Congress party promises to not do, and that promise should start off from the state governments first. Otherwise, this pyar ki dukaan and mohabbat ki dukaan, the halwai remains the same. It is the same set of people who will come back. When they'll come back in power, the same instincts will come through. These are all the positions that he's taking when he doesn't have power in the center. So I think he needs to walk the talk. He needs to ensure that what he genuinely means, that constitution has to be upheld, he needs to practice that in the state governments that his party is ruling in.
I think that's a very good point about executive power in state governments, which, and this happens. It does happen across the aisle. And we'll take that to the panel in just a moment. But Percival Bilamoria, if I can get you in on this idea of arrested leaders. One of the points that the opposition made through the campaign was that two of their prominent leaders, Arvind Kejriwal and Hemant Soren, had been jailed. It looked as if Kejriwal was going to come out, but that did not happen. The trial court judge, Justice Nyay Bindu, what a name, said that the ED had not made a convincing case. The Delhi High Court felt the trial court had not applied their mind enough. Now the case will go to the Supreme Court. One of the points that those who talk about creeping authoritarianism make is that institutions like the judiciary cannot withstand or cannot stand up to a very powerful government. Even jurists like Fali Nariman used to say that the record or the history of India's judiciary tells you or shows you that the courts aren't very independent in the face of very powerful governments. We all know how the courts behaved during the emergency. We know that. It's on record. How do you see the argument around, let's say, an Arvind Kejriwal, a Hemant Soren, a Manish Sisodia, Satyendra Jain still being in jail? Can we unmute Mr. Bilamoria, please? I think you're muted at your end, sir. Can you please just unmute yourself? Yeah, Go ahead. Yeah.
So look, the point is really, does anybody who is a citizen of India have any immunity? I think the constitution says no. So if there is somebody against whom there is a reasonable ground to suspect that he or she is corrupt, right? Now, whether the person is a journalist or a social activist, whatever it may be, even a lawyer, that person must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Now, if people are going to say that, look, you stand on your pedestal and say, this is only because I'm a journalist and he doesn't like me, and this is the ED acting because the PM has a hotline to the ED. I think I don't buy that. So, and also remember that in all these cases,
you don't buy it. Why? You don't buy it. Why? There are those who spoke of how the Congress subverted institutions in its time. Why would it be so unusual for the BJP to do the same? Rajat makes the point that all political parties have the same instinct. All powerful political parties have the same instinct. Why is it so outrageous to suggest that the ED takes its instructions from the government of the day?
But when you say that, you are assuming something that doesn't exist. I don't think that is really the case. That's my view, because when you say something like that, you have to establish it with evidence. Now, all I'm saying really is that, as I made the point before, Barkha, today, I don't think anybody can say about the two gentlemen that you mentioned that they are guilty or not guilty. All we are saying is let the law take its course. Let the courts decide. There's also one more aspect to this, which is, I've often felt that, there's a lot of grandstanding. So, for example, let's take what happened last week. Now, there was a matter before the vacation bench of the High Court. Now, the High Court clearly said it was a Friday. I need 2 days to write my order and pronounce. Now, what was the need to go to the Supreme Court? So, I do believe that there is some electioneering and election strategy behind this, because you are going to the Supreme Court when the High Court has not yet pronounced its order. And I think there is a little posturing that is going on, which is, that enables them to say, oh my God, look, even the Supreme Court didn't give me bail. And then there are people, and this is the most astounding part. This is what I object to. There are people who stand up and say in the public, they say that, look, there is a serious crisis in the judiciary. That is wrong. Please remember, let's take the emergency. It was the judiciary that ultimately came to our rescue. Let's not forget that.
It was also the judiciary that didn't do its job initially. The father of the present Chief Justice, then Chief Justice, did not. Taveen, sorry, are you wanting to interject? Can I just get Taveen in?
The judiciary came to our rescue. It was Indira Gandhi herself who declared an election. The judiciary was totally docile. It didn't once, make any effort to stand up for, we were deprived of the right to life. No judge spoke up. Yeah. And if they did, they were kicked out. So you can't say that.
But complete your point.
I'd like to say something.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, Sabha, briefly.
I just find it astounding because Mr. Bilamoria said, show me the evidence. I'll show the evidence. Just show me one case where PMLA is applied and ED is applied to people who have joined the BJP. So nothing happens in a vacuum. This is not a perfect world where you say you must obediently go by every court, go by every law. You tell me what has happened to Praful Patel? What has happened to Ajit Pawar? There is a whole political narrative, the timing, the arrest, and let me also read out data. I can get my book, it's there. How many of the opposition parties have cases, especially if they are parties that the BJP fights very strongly, and I mean TMC and Aam Aadmi Party. And what happens to the guys who defect? The cases go away. So that's a fact. It's not an opinion. I am only offering you facts, sir. You have an opinion. I, being a journalist, am only giving you data and facts. Indian Express has done a whole series on it. Yeah, 91%. Yeah.
This is the same Indian Express that during the emergency published a blank sheet, the front sheet, because it was censored. So I think we all agreed that, what the conditions that we are talking about now cannot ever be even compared to those sad times. But really what I'm saying is that the judiciary, when you talk about, for example, the basic structure of the constitution, right? The judiciary has stepped in time and time again. See, even when you're talking about PMLA, right? PMLA has been subject to judicial review. There have been certain safeguards in the PMLA which have been spelled out. And one safeguard which I just mentioned earlier is that there must be a grounds of arrest, and your argument for bail must be in relation to that grounds. I've said this ad nauseum. I'm not going to repeat it anymore.
Can I ask a question on bail? The Chief Justice himself has often spoken about bail being the norm. Because we don't see any high-profile politicians of the BJP also in jail without bail. If we did, it would perhaps look different. If there was a scenario where there was Arvind Kejriwal in jail, Hemant Soren in jail, and X and Y affiliated to the government also in jail, maybe it would look different. Right now, the reason it looks targeted is because, as Sabha said, where are the people on the other side? What happened to their corruption cases? What happened to Ajit Pawar? What happened to Praful Patel? What about the Chief Justice's sort of guidance that bail should be the norm?
But even before the Chief Justice uttered that sentence, it has always been the norm. Our Supreme Court has set out this indelible principle, which is that bail is the rule, jail the exception. But when you ask for bail, there are certain guidelines as to when and how the bail should be given. Okay. And in this particular case, there was, of course, the question that, there is a gentleman who's the chief minister, which is a very highly powerful and a very influential position. Now, will he be tempted to tamper with the evidence? Now, that is a call not for you and I to make on a panel, that the courts will decide. So the short point is the law is robust. The courts have, by and large, adhered to the law as it stands. It is only in politicking, there are accusations that are made either way.
Okay, let's come to a big fault line, which is the Lok Sabha Speaker's post. Now, we know that there's going to be a rare election unless something happens overnight between today and tomorrow. And this is going to be a contested post. Rahul Gandhi has said today that the government said it wants to cooperate, but the Prime Minister says one thing and means another. Let's listen in, and we'll come back to what's happening to the functioning of Parliament, which is, of course, essential to a healthy democracy. Take a look.
मेरा कहना है कि नरेंद्र मोदी जी कहते कुछ है और करते कुछ है, यही इनकी फॉर्मूला है, यही इनकी स्ट्रेटजी है और इनको ये बदलना ही पड़ेगा। इशू क्या है कि पूरा देश जानता है कि प्रधानमंत्री के शब्दों का कोई मतलब नहीं। प्रधानमंत्री कहते हैं कोऑपरेशन होनी चाहिए, सबको मिलकर काम करना चाहिए, बाहर वो कहते हैं और अंदर कुछ और करते हैं। और हमारे लीडर को कहा गया कि कॉल रिटर्न होगा, अभी तक कॉल रिटर्न नहीं हुआ।
So as of now, there is going to be a contest. Manisha Priyam, this has become another point of confrontation between the two sides. I'll play out Mr. JP Nadda's statement also in just a moment. Is this healthy? Healthy competition? Why not? Why not? I actually don't understand why we are taking this contest so seriously. Like, what does it prove? Let there be a contest.
So, yes, I mean, I would disagree with the very eminent co-panelist who's also a lawyer, as I can make out. I mean, politicking is not a bad word. Politics is the sine qua non of who we are. All institutions originate. Politicking is not equal to politics. And the fact is that political voices or judgments can be made. Forget it about the fact that one court gave a bail, the other court says, oh, that one really erred, and the matter goes to a higher court. It's the right of people. But the fact is that today political communication is much more easy. People look at very quick communication through channels that are very different and far more technologically advanced today than they were at the time of the emergency. And people want to make their own judgment about how their right to liberty stands in case they use their voice to make a critique of the government that governs them. Now, coming to the issue of the speaker, this is a government that has a mandate to rule, undoubtedly, with 240, members of parliament. The invitation should have gone to them, and justly and rightly, it's been made, offered this, but it's in power to come to that 272 mark. They have at least a 32 that are supporting them. Now, the political expectation of the people was that there would have been some consultation amongst NDA allies. We don't know whether that consultation has happened or not. And for citizenry to expect soon after an election that political parties that they've just now anointed with power will show some amount of transparency or discussion with political desires of citizenry is not misplaced. It's politics and it's all correct. Now, the fact is that doesn't seem to have happened. And the fact is the old speaker candidate seems to have been repeated. The other side has gone ahead and they've maybe just scoring a moral point, but they've put up their own candidate and there's nothing wrong with this. And politicking, first of all, is not a bad word. Political participation makes a democracy robust. Every institution is robust when political participation and citizen voice is robust. On another account, when you come back to me, Barkha, I will speak out on a lot of what I think are curtailments even of press rights and citizen rights to speak out, but that's in another round.
Okay, Percy, you had a brief interjection and then Rajat. Percival?
Yeah, so there is nothing wrong with politicking. All I'm saying is please leave the judiciary out of it. So
Cannot be left out because your own judiciary makes comments on its own lower court. Why didn't they allow for bail? We are told lower courts are the house where it should be decided. The higher court could have said that maybe they acted in haste, but I'm not going to overturn that. So we'll have our views. We will have comments on the judiciary and we can have it.
Okay, let him just speak, which is all part of the democratic spirit as well. And Manisha can, of course, disagree. Go ahead,
we won't get scared of the court. We won't get scared of the court. We have to understand it.
Okay,
I'm
let
not
him speak.
saying that you should get scared of the court, ma'am. All I'm saying is the judiciary is a very important pillar of democracy. And the judiciary has stood us in very good stead. So therefore, don't use the judiciary as a platform to do electioneering. That's all I'm saying. In debates like this, or look, when you talk about politics, I remember a time, I was also around during the emergency, by the way. So just to correct, Mr. Lin Singh. So I'm not telling anyone my age though. But the point really is that, look, there was a time not too long ago when different sides of the of the political parties, you could sit down, have a cup of tea and have a healthy debate. Unfortunately, those days are now gone. And I rue that. And I think the decibel level, and of course, the media has a huge role to play in this. The decibel levels are very high, very shrill. There is no bar to anybody having their own opinion. You can speak. We can debate that in a very healthy way. And that is
Yeah.
what democracy is all about.
Okay. Manisha, I know you disagree, but let me just get the others. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in this loop. Rajat, we are seeing some shifts. The fact that Rajnath Singh says that he met with Malika Arjun Kharge 3 times, this would not have happened in the last two terms of the Modi government. You know, we have those pictures as well. Kiran Rijiju reaching out to the opposition. Consensus broke down, right? That consensus breaking down doesn't necessarily feed to this emergency versus constitution debate, or does it? Rajat?
See, I have a different interpretation of what is going on in the garb of the speaker election. I think what is happening is that for the past 10 years, we've seen a very productive parliament. We've seen sessions being conducted. There have been very few walkouts by the opposition, largely because perhaps they didn't have enough number to create any obstacle. But now with the 232 number on the India Alliance side, they see a hope of obstructionist politics. Again, I'm not judging it. BJP, when it was in its days when they were sitting in the opposition, they perhaps used that opportunity to also keep the government in the dock consistently. I think what Rahul Gandhi is setting the template before the start of the upcoming session is that, see, things are going to be different. And if you have to run the house, you have to come with folded hands towards me and discuss and deliberate every single issue, even if the issues are largely bipartisan in nature. So I think that approach we will see from the opposition, and that is how they are going to assert their power with their numbers on their side. So I think that is that power dynamics at play.
But isn't it a kind of political payback for those moments when there was mass suspension of opposition MPs, right? This is politics.
Yeah, it's a pendulum. Yeah, Barkha, absolutely. It's a pendulum. It swung one direction, and it will try to restore by the laws of nature. It will swing to the other direction. But look at, this is what I'm saying. BJP would then change their tactics. I mean, what they've done so far cannot carry on any further, and they will change their game plan, and they will have to. Now, how Nadda ji as a leader of Rajya Sabha would be able to conduct, he will have to mellow down much more in order to reach across the aisle and create that space for a well-functioning parliament. I think the bigger test is not government. It is the bigger test is the parliament. How do you smoothly run and productively run the parliament? When clearly when you're seeing Rahul Gandhi's belligerent approach to everything, which largely seems to be a settled affair, like the speaker election. So he'll put everything out there to the test of fire.
So before Sabha and Tavleen come in, JP Nadda called the Congress basically hypocrites. Take a look.
लोक सभा के स्पीकर का चुनाव कंडीशनल होता है क्या? कंडीशन के साथ होता है क्या? डिप्टी स्पीकर तय करो तब हम स्पीकर में तुम्हारे को मदद करेंगे. और ये कौन कह रहे हैं? ये वो लोग कह रहे हैं जिन्होंने कांग्रेस की सरकार में तेलंगाना में स्पीकर भी अपना बनाया है और डिप्टी स्पीकर भी अपना बनाया है. ये चर्चा करने बैठे. कर्नाटक में इनका ही स्पीकर, इनका ही डिप्टी स्पीकर. ममता प्रजातंत्र की बात बोलती है. वेस्ट बंगाल में इनका ही स्पीकर, इनका ही डिप्टी स्पीकर. तमिलनाडु में डीएमके का इनका ही स्पीकर, इनका ही डिप्टी स्पीकर. केरला में इनका ही स्पीकर, इनका ही डिप्टी स्पीकर कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी का. ये हाथी के दांत दिखाने के और खाने के और. ये ऐसे लोग हैं जो हिपोक्रेसी में जीते हैं. ये दोहरे मापदंड में जीते हैं.
So Sabha, the point, of course, the context is that the opposition had said, if you give us deputy speaker, we will support Om Birla as speaker. Mr. Nadda is also rightly pointing out n number of examples from states where he's saying both posts have gone to the ruling party. Right, Sabha? Can we unmute Sabha? Sabha, go ahead.
Barkha, I'll just elaborate. So there's no of course he has a point. And I take Rajat's point about everybody's inclined towards having their way all if they can. Yeah. No, look, there are 3-4 things happening here. Contrary to what is being seen, that who were the people who went and took their oath with the constitution in the hand? It is Akhilesh Yadav and Rahul Gandhi. Both of them are going to face 10 by-elections in UP, where the BJP has been so sort of gobsmacked. 10 by-elections are coming up. There's a politics. So it's not a juvenile act. It's a very well-crafted act to go there and stand there. because the Mayawati is also suddenly sat up. No, she's realized the Dalits are gone. 10 by-elections because a lot of the candidates who got elected, they were MLAs. So important things are going to happen in the future. This is partly politics. The BJP also has to get out of the zone where they realize it's not just them. So all they had to do, and I realized that Kiran Rijiju, because I was just watching his body language, would like to actually have a consensus, because what is going to happen right now, Barkha, Mark, on the ground is going to play out what they're telling me. The politicians are saying that who is Piyush Goyal and Om Birla, look at his caste, and they're opposing a Dalit. A lot of eyes are on UP. So you've got to understand the politics. What has happened in this election, it has in UP, the whole Hindutva thing is blasted open. Okay, it has, by caste. It's a return of Mandal. Even the RSS is doing that in its own assessment. They recognize that. And so you think they are not going to, they are playing their politics right now, where they've gone a bit wrong, because that is not necessarily the politics of TMC right now. So I'm just literally, examining what is happening, what are the political consequences. So now what I think the BJP would still like to do is settle this matter and agree to a deputy speaker of that. One section of the BJP would like to do, because they understand the implications of what is going to go down. You're going to have these by-elections tomorrow. Again, you have the Dalit issue there. That's I'm pointing out something which comes from my. Yeah,
I think that's a very good point. And Rajat, briefly before I come to Tavleen, since you said Rahul Gandhi waving the constitution all the time now is juvenile. Sabha saying it worked for them. It worked for them in UP.
But where is that data? Where is the causal link?
We know this much that the BJP did badly.
See, there are Barkha ji,
we know the Dalit vote shifted or got divided. This much we know. In UP, you agree?
It moved away from Bahujan Samaj Party to certain parties. In what proportion, and in what areas, and for what reasons, that is still not established. See, this is where, if you want to twist the data, and if you wanted to start speaking your language, it will. That's the problem with statistics. But the causal links have to be established to reach to that conclusion, that it is because Congress is seen as safeguarding the constitution that they have got those votes. I am sorry, it is not as simple as that. And there is not one reason where in fact, in the conversations where people are saying, oh, my constitution is under threat, and therefore I'm going to come out and come in and in defense of the constitution. We are the warriors there fighting on behalf of the India Alliance. It didn't work like that. This was not part of the conversations. Yes, some kind of hoodwinking the people, saying that, if BJP is coming in, you will lose your reservation. That is not a strategy. I mean, if you want to fool people around in the garb of saving the constitution, then God save you and God save the constitution then.
Okay. Tavleen and then Manisha. Okay.
Mature thing that we should all be discussing.
Two very differing perspectives. Mr. Modi, however, can I just say, Mr. Modi bowed before the constitution at the first meeting of the NDA members of parliament. I think we had that image somewhere. Tavleen, go ahead.
Yeah, he did it last time as well, and the time before.
Correct.
That he does that as a thing. I actually have not met anyone on my travels who mentioned the Constitution or any threat to the Constitution. I think what people were really sick of was the arrogance with which they were being treated. This 400 par and Modi, aayega to Modi hi, etc. In my view, that is what really worked against them. And the Hindutva card, as Sabha has pointed out, just didn't take off at all. But really, it was ahankar. I heard that word so often, and I'm sure you did too on your travels. People don't like leaders who take them for granted. They threw out Indira Gandhi and her son for exactly this kind of thing. So I think that the BJP was beginning to be complacent, taking the voters for granted, and that's what worked against them. I don't think that the Constitution was an issue. And to tell you the truth, I think they're making a mockery of the Constitution by waving it around, at the drop of a hat. Yesterday, what was the need for that? There are very serious issues to be discussed inside Parliament. Why are you, collecting under the statues of Gandhi, etc., and waving the Constitution? I think that was a really silly gimmick. It was really, forget juvenile, that's the wrong word. it was childish. And also, I think that there will be more understanding amongst the opposition and the government if the opposition stops behaving as though they have won. Rahul Gandhi is behaving as though he's already prime minister.
You,
I mean,
you,
he talks about
you,
Narendra Modi with complete contempt. Narendra Modi is the prime minister of India. You can't say
you,
Narendra Modi ki baat pe koi vishwas nahi kar. I mean, let's have some dignity in the conversation. I don't see.
you said it's a mockery to wave the constitution around. Why is it why is it okay for Mr. Modi to bow down before the constitution, but not for Rahul Gandhi to carry it to parliament?
He's bowing down because he's gone into parliament, and as prime minister, he's always done it. He's did it 2 or 3 times before. Every time he's won an election, as far as I know, he's said, I respect. He even bowed down on the steps of the Lok Sabha the first time he entered it. And he said, this is the temple of democracy. So it's one thing to say I bow before the constitution. That is what will guide me through my tenure. And it's quite another thing to wave it around, as if it was some sort of, a comic book.
So two very different perspectives on the constitution as a protagonist in our politics. Percival and then Manisha Priya. Percival?
Yeah, very much mistaken. He also said, when alluding to the emergency, he also said that we have to ensure that no other government can ever declare emergency just as it was done in 1975.
What does that tell us?
I mean, what's today's debate all about? What's the difference between what we underwent during the emergency and what is alleged to have been to be going on just now?
Okay, fair. Let's bring in Manisha Priya. Manisha, go ahead.
Exactly want me to respond to?
Whatever you want to pick up, go ahead. Whatever you want to pick up, go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of things very quickly. Rajit made a very strong point about there being no causality. Let me correct the error here that in voting, there cannot be a causality about what exactly was the voter motivation. There is something called multi-causality. Voters vote for many reasons. And if this no causality can be established here, there is no causality that also says that if you give them so many kgs of grain in a bag and call them Labharthi, they'll come and vote for you. Even that was political propaganda of a kind. Voters understand that this is political propaganda. The whole bunk about women's vote going just one particular way because the grain will be mixed with some religion, etc. Women have voted on political issues, on issues of livelihood, on issues of what I call our futures, thinking about what their young ones will do. So in the arena of political deliberation, when political sovereignty moves home, remember, India's poorest debate many issues. I am in Srinagar, I am in the state of the Valley of Kashmir, and I am talking to people about why they voted the way they have. Remember, they've not just not voted, the BJP never fought the elections here. They've also not voted in favor of two of their former chief ministers. So there's been a lot of political deliberation. I'm not putting the issues out there because I also fear, and the fact that I speak guarded, it tells you that civil liberties, the right of citizens to speak their minds freely without accusations to any, needs to be restored at the heart of the debate. At the moment, let both sides listen to us as we speak out as citizens. We do want to still put forward citizens' issues, number one. Second, on the issue of the emergency, I would still be very, very cautious and say that many events have had similarities. Emergency is a particular type of event that happened in India. The broader rubric is authoritarianism. I have much evidence, much publications to say that we have become willing ethnic nationalists. There is a different modus operandi at work. Large parts of the ultra rich who are vote banks of one particular party do not want to believe that we are losing our civil liberties. But if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, they believe they are losing it. So we are a different India in 2024, much richer for the top, definitely not that situation at the bottom. Two Indias are speaking two ways. Last but not the least, remember, we have had an opposition party that has fought this election under-resourced. And in many key battles in many areas, in Uttar Pradesh, many defeats of ministers. In Bihar, the victory of the CPIML on 2 seats, both defeating ministers of the NDA, Engineer Rashid winning here, in Kashmir. All of these tell you there has been something that the voter is trying to talk about, and which is that established political parties need to take note of what the citizen has to tell the political class, and that's something that the media needs to protect. As of now, I'm not here to say, oh, this is not emergency, I'm very comfortable. I'm uneasy.
Okay, you're uneasy, and I think that's a word that many might agree with, but not necessarily with the nomenclature. As far as willing ethnic, willing sort of nationalist or ethno-nationalist is concerned, Manisha, the world, large parts of the world is dealing with sort of populism or populist politics, both on the left and the right. So this is not unique to India. There is a churn happening in how politics is played. Let's take last comment, Sabha. Manisha is uneasy, but some might say the fact that Rahul Gandhi can wave the constitution around, play aggressively on the front foot, points actually to a robust health of the democracy that we're in.
So here's the thing, Barkha, that I absolutely get the point about authoritarianism, majoritarianism, about trying to have control through the system, through independent institutions. I get all that. So there's nothing, but I completely disagree. The emergency is the emergency. When you're not even doing that, you've just suspended everyone's rights. So I beg to disagree with that definition. Of course, and I'm the first person who's been writing repeatedly, about all of that. So I see a very clear distinction. Okay, I get, and that by saying that, the way Manisha, my friend Manisha, is stating it as if those who don't agree with her are somehow saying that things are perfect right now. That's not the situation. We just have a different phraseology for different things. I just want to be very clear. And I think it's important to remember what went wrong in our history to get it right. And I also see very good Prime Minister Modi, and everyone is reminding everybody about the emergency. We have to look beyond, okay, the Congress doesn't like it. Okay, even PMLA, they've all together in different points. Congress has also increased the powers that now have opposition.
And the UAPA came to us from the Congress.
Yeah. So we must know what we are all about. We can't, when we are journalists are coming and analyzing things, it's not that because I hate this so much and I'm going to deny what happened there. Let's be dispassionate. Let's try and be as objective as we can possibly be. I keep trying, in spite of my very obvious biases. I try. No, that's not the emergency, I'm afraid. And yes, everybody contributed towards draconian laws. And now one regime, which became a single party regime for a decade, took advantage of it. Let's see if things change.
Yeah. Percival, last thoughts? Can you unmute yourself at your end, please? Yeah. We can't hear. Yeah.
Yesterday, if you really want to know about the emergency, I saw a very interesting news report by somebody who is known to be the father of investigative journalism, Mohan Guruswamy. Now, he was involved in what happened firsthand, and he narrates stuff which even historically I was not aware of. So, for example, he says that when Mrs. Gandhi came back to power, the entire Shah Commission report disappeared. Right? So, there are shades and shades. Right? This is an absolutely extreme position that our country went to. Please don't forget that the 42nd Amendment also amended our preamble. Look, our preamble was amended to say that we are a socialist secular republic. That was never the original intent of the framers of the Constitution. And this issue was debated. Ad nauseum it was debated. Right. But Mrs. Gandhi just with one sweep of the pen went ahead and amended it. And the date of the preamble is still the original date of November 1947.
I think that's a well taken point, and I think Sabha has made a similar point. But to Rajat's point, Tavleen, as I come to you for last comments, and then I'll give Rajat the closing word. One of our audience members says in Tamil Nadu, the entire mainstream media is fully under the thumb of the ruling DMKs. Savaku Shankar, who spoke out against the government, is in jail. Others have been jailed earlier. This was the point I think that Rajat was making, that this instinct is across the aisle. This instinct to silence the media, this instinct to have draconian laws, this instinct to have overarching sort of executive power, this is not confined to any one party. Yet there are those like Dr. Manisha Prem who would argue, no, but there's something distinct about this time, this moment, this phase. As you said, you've suffered, your son has suffered. What would you say?
I find it very dangerous to. We had a dictatorship during the emergency. Parliament didn't exist. Nothing existed. The judiciary didn't exist. The media didn't exist. We haven't seen that yet. We have seen a degree of autocracy, which is unpleasant. But it's absolutely true that I've seen that kind of autocracy before Mr. Modi became Prime Minister as well. If I suffered because of Modi becoming Prime Minister, let me tell you something, it was no picnic trying to work to write against Sonia Gandhi. I mean, I openly threatened with my column would be closed, the Indian Express was. So, this is, Mr. Modi hasn't come out of, thin air. This is a road that has been paved for him by laws made by decades of Congress rule. And we must never make the mistake of mixing up, the emergency with what we've seen in the past 10 years. We cannot. Autocracy is autocracy and dictatorship is dictatorship.
Manisha, do you want to add to that before Rajat closes?
I just want to tell you that as a child, I was responsible for looking after George Fernandez hiding in our house. And it was that day I could just read Hindi newspapers. I used to sit on the newspaper and read it. And I read that uncle who was in my front room was arrested for the dynamite kand, etc. So it's not that I do not understand what happened. I have lived it. My family has been a part of it. I don't want to extend that story any further. It's not about me. But I feel that unless the defense of civil liberties is much stronger, we have many areas where there has been a regress. I have never said that moment and this moment is the same. I do not think that only one government is responsible. Rajat has made a very strong point, but the fact is that for many reasons, I believe that there have been incursions into civil liberties, and we are also going to have a new criminal procedure code. I do not know what the changes are, but from what I hear, there is ample scope for me to believe that we need to understand that this will have very grave implications for us. And I believe very much that the poor in this country are underserved with respect to their basic rights. And though that notion of rights is a far more expanded right today than just the right to speak. And I believe that the poor have spoken up. What is very different from the emergency is that there is an elite urban upper class which votes one way and is now seen as a vote bank for one particular party, is also very strong in saying that we simply don't want to speak. That upper class is also a very global, rich upper class. It doesn't believe that many of the laws of the land could catch it or could deny it its liberties. So these are different moments. But I believe for many reasons, there is ample incursions into the arena of civil liberties. And we need to be very, very vigilant to protect what is ours and what is given to us by the Constitution of India. It's a matter of a great crafting and the world's largest democracy that we want to save.
Well, we are back to the Constitution, and to that extent, it is what we will all hold as sacred, even while it has been amended multiple times. But the basic structure doctrine does guide us. Rajat, you said that this instinct exists across the aisle, but this instinct must be pushed back against, and that is why you need other institutions of democracy to function, right? What do you see ahead? As there is a more confrontational politics that is going to unfold because of the numbers on either side, what do you see ahead immediately?
So first of all, see, just as a closing remark, I want to reiterate today remains a solemn milestone. We finish our 50 years since the day of emergency, and I think all the parliamentarians across the aisle agree to the fact that that day shouldn't repeat in our constitutional future. And therefore, we should strive to remove such draconian provisions within our constitution, which can prove, detrimental at a later point in time. So perhaps the constitution should come together through a common resolution that we want to do away with the internal disturbance provisions of the emergency powers, which are there in the constitution. It should be done away with. And what better time than the 50th year when you are marking that day? That is number one. Number two is, ours is a noisy democracy, and it is noisy enough, and it will get more and more noisy in the days to come. And I think this is where public at large comes as the biggest arbiter of justice. They tend to swing the pendulum whenever it reaches the extreme ends. And,
Yes.
Trust the public. Our democracy resides in their hearts and minds, not in us elites. They know how to do justice, and they operate not in a synchronized way, but in a completely decentralized, non-synchronized way. They assert their understanding of which way the pendulum of justice is swinging, and they'll bring it back each time it has happened. And I think we should commend the public of our country, not go by what a Swedish think tank is going to put us on a rank as to what kind of a democracy we are. Instead, trust on our people. They will never let us slip into a dictatorship or an autocracy. Instruments will be there, but they will be temporary instruments at the behest of the powerfuls, but not permanent.
I think on that great note of hope and consensus, we can close this debate. We'd all agree, I think, with what Rajat has just said, which is a rare moment for a conversation that is political. Thank you, Rajat, Tavleen, Sabah, Manisha, and Percival. And to our audience, thank you, and see you tomorrow.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.